Quantum computers. This is Intelligent Performance.
Welcome to the Intelligent Performance Podcast. A pleasure to have you with us again on the show. And today we have a very special kind of industry veteran, Marty Britton, from the world of all incredible things of kind of actually candidate screening for when it comes to job hiring. And Marty is no doubt one of the leading experts globally on this and has spent far more years in this space than probably she cares to admit. And it's literally at the moment screens over 26,000 people annually and has just celebrated 50 years in business, which I think is a huge milestone for her company. So Marty, first of all, welcome to the Intelligent Performance Podcast. A real pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here today. Happy to join.
Super. And first of all, congratulations on your book, which is you've released as part of the celebration of 50 years in business. I think that in itself is such a massive milestone. And I can't think of anyone better placed than yourself, actually, to really talk about candidate screening and making sure that you get the right person. I just want to touch on your book very briefly because instead, the title of it is Screening for the One. And when I first came across that, I thought it was like I think maybe for my wife, like screening my wife or something along those lines. So I'm just curious, why did you go with the title of Screening for the One? What's it about for you?
Okay, so first of all, screen, when we brought that word up, we're going to use different words, but our industry is background screeners. So that's kind of what we do. We do background screening on people. So when clients want to hire people, companies are bringing on people on board, they want to make sure they do a thorough background check. So that's where the title Screening for the One came out, because we're screening for that one person you want to hire.
Well, I won't necessarily be recommending it for my single friends as to how to screen their candidate, but maybe do people actually use your services to screen potential romantic partners, perhaps? Or is it across that?
But there are other sites that would do that, and something that they would want to look for might be like, does this person have a criminal record check? I don't want to date.
Yeah, right.
But no, it's a little different than that. A little different, Michael.
So let's dive into your background. So you actually started out as a civil engineer. You've taken over the family business. I'm curious, that's something I think about for my kids as what I would like them to do, perhaps, or at least have an interest in running in the family business. But I'm curious about what was your journey in that? Obviously, you started out a very different path, and now you're here. What was that like for you? Or kind of tell us a bit more about that journey.
Well, it was just something that wasn't planned. Like, life just kind of throws you these curveballs sometimes, right? And it's often about timing. So 30 years ago, I would have been on maternity leave with my youngest child at that point. So according to the family, I had time on my hands. I had lots of time because I was on mat leave. And at that same time, my father he was the founder of Britton Management, and he became ill when I was on that mat leave. And according to the family, like I said, I had the time to help out. So I did. I stepped up and helped out because apparently I had nothing else to do with my time. And it just kind of evolved. It just, I was very fortunate. The job that I had, a great group of people I worked with that we still keep in touch. They kept my job for a couple of years because they kept thinking, oh, well, she'll come to her senses. She'll want to come back to this, like this real job thing. And I never did. It was just an opportunity presented itself, and I just took advantage of it. It wasn't planned.
Phenomenal. That's great. I think
planned at all.
that is awesome to hear. And of course, just raising children is just a piece of cake for all those who've got children. We all know that. And and leading a company is equally as easy. If not easier, though. Yeah, no doubt. Not a. I'm trying to think as a newborn leading a company, especially if your father's sick. I think that was is that why that kind of transition took place?
Yes, he was very sick during that whole time where we were transitioning. And yeah, I had 2 kids at home, and yeah, it was a struggle, but you just bear down and do what you have to do, right?
I would get it. So flash forward to today, the company's running 26,000 reviews and kind of checks on people. Sorry, individual checks, not actual number of checks, even more, loads more checks than just that. I'm curious, in terms of this podcast is all about intelligent performance, looking at often counterintuitive ways or strategies that people use in different niches to achieve high levels of performance. So I'm curious, if I was to ask you the question around what does intelligent performance mean in the background checking space or industry, how would you answer that? What do you think you do better, or what do people get potentially wrong sometimes when it comes to candidate screening that you need it, if you focus here, that's where you get, exceptional results.
So where they go wrong in background screening is often, this is where I see the real problem is it's time sensitive. We want to get this candidate. I need to get him in the seat tomorrow. I need to hire him tomorrow. How fast can you do all this work? I need to make sure Johnny really is Johnny and who Johnny says he is. And that's where we as a background screening company have to come in and say, whoa, you got to make sure Johnny really is Johnny and who he says he is. And that's where it's our job to kind of put on the brakes, slow things down, and make sure our clients realize what really is critically important to check to make sure that that candidate is who they say they are. And you cannot rush it. And I understand, that companies have, we have to place this candidate by this time, or here's the one that we love. The candidate says, well, I have another job offer pending, so you need to make me an offer. It's like, yeah, right. Where have we heard that one before, right? But our response is, you've got to take the time and hire slowly. And, if Johnny really wants the job, he will be there. And for an employer, if they're feeling the stress of that, you can always put in a conditional offer if the background check doesn't come back clear later on, that you can have it out. We always, if somebody's pressuring that company to say, well, I've got another offer, I got to go, you got to hire me today. Do not do that. Put an offer in. If you have to, put the offer in contingent on letting them go after the background check. Because the background check, unfortunately, depending on what you're checking and which country in this great big world that we live in, take time.
Your specialism, you work mainly across North America, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Marty?
North America, yes, but we do have international partners, so we have a global reach. If you're hiring globally, we have those partnerships.
And the types of people you're typically screening, they would be foreign arriving into the US? They would be largely domestic within the US or that kind of North American region? Who would you say your typical focus is?
Typical focus is on Canada and the US. We are a Canadian-based company with operations in the US. Typically, it's clients who are hiring within Canada and the US. That's where most of our clients will come to do the screening. But, especially since COVID, we hire differently today. And now we are hiring more globally because we can, and we don't need those people in the office like it used to be. So that's why it's kind of nice in a way that we are doing that global hiring, that we have access to more talent and different perspectives, which is wonderful. But you just need to make sure that you check from whichever country in the world their people are coming from. And that's why it was so important for us to grow globally so that we could meet those demands.
I'm curious what are some of the worst things you've seen? Because I feel like that would be the kind of like the key question I've got here is like, I wonder what you find, because I would imagine most companies might engage you towards the end. They've done the thorough screening, they've done the interviews, and then it's like, okay, cool. Because they don't want to pay for your services to screen everyone. It's just really when it gets kind of a nitty gritty part, right? And then,
Absolutely right.
and then it's like, okay, cool. So, we really like Sarah. Here you go, Marty and crew. What are some of the things you found out about people and how's that really played out when that kind of let's say, presented person's not quite what the reality says?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And a lot of times it's just a simple misrepresentation
Right.
that the candidate is giving. But at the end of the day, it's still a bold-faced lie. And some of the things we see, Michael, is very common. And people think that, like, for instance, they'll say, I have a Bachelor of Arts, from University of Toronto, let's just say, right? And you'll go, okay. But they neglected to say the word degree in there. They didn't say Bachelor of Arts degree. So often we'll look at those things and go, so they were just in the program, but they didn't graduate. Now, of course, we have relationships with all the institutions in the world, so we'll actually reach out to that institution and verify that Johnny does have a Bachelor of Arts degree or not. But that's where we see it's can be so subtle sometimes, the misrepresentation, that if you look at it and you don't check, it's very common with education. And the other big area where we see a lot of misrepresentation, Michael, is in the employment verifications.
Uh, what do you mean by that?
Well, they'll say that they will over-glorify their position, what they did for the company. That's the most common one. They'll stretch their dates of employment
Right.
to make sure that there's no gaps on their resume. It's like, oh yeah, I was always employed. I left company A, went to company B. So there's often big gaps of unemployment for whatever reason that they don't want to report. And title is the big one, and reason for departure. Those are the three things that it's really important for someone to check when you're hiring someone, is to verify all those employment credentials. That is key, because that will make sure that you do know who you are hiring. That's hence the screening for the one, right? You want to make sure you're screening for that person and that they are who they say they are, and they have all those wonderful credentials.
Yeah.
Actually, if you don't check, and it's time consuming, and you have to know, you have to have the relationships with the academic institutions to actually do the work. And it's money well spent, let me tell you.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I feel like it's interesting. Over here, there's a kind of a lot of talk about trust but verify, right? As a kind of a way to navigate just leadership in general. But it sounds like that's kind of the same strategy here. Like you go through this interview process, then you go to the screen. It's just verifying that everything checks out, and that's all good, really. I'm curious, when you find out that actually they attended the program but didn't get the degree, how does that, when you feed that back to the company, how do they, I can imagine some companies just don't even want to hear it, even though they've paid for your services. Is that what you find?
Yeah, it's a big disappointment for them because, think about HR's job. Their job is to find that body. They've spent a lot of time. They've done a lot of work, and, companies are desperate to fill those seats and get those people in the seats. And you're right. Sometimes they just don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. But unfortunately, it's our job to get them the facts. And we always, always, always tell them the importance of hiring slowly. Fire quickly, but hire slowly. But sometimes that they just don't kind of resonate with that. And it's like, oh, no, we need Johnny in the seat tomorrow. And it's like, yeah, okay. And I know sometimes that is the reality of the situation. So then what we'll always make sure our clients do is, if you have to put in that offer because you need him in that seat tomorrow, put the offer in, but contingent on the background check coming back clear, so that later on, if you find that, something is not right, and at least you have an out to release that person. That's what we kind of say, because that's often the hardest part that we find with our clients is, depending on the type of checks they want, they're going to take time. You have to, especially if they're doing a social media check. I mean, that can take up to a week sometimes, right? The social media part, and we can't control that. But that's why it's important to do the conditional.
That piece has that become a bigger deal for organizations like you in terms of the social media part? I would imagine that's quite interesting. Like, how do you even check, quote unquote, social media? What are you looking for?
That's a good question. So what we're looking for is negative, derogatory information, how they talk about their work, things like that. Social media checks have really evolved nicely over the years. Now we actually have software that we use to start the search, because think of it's a rabbit hole. Like a social media check, if you're the employer and you go, oh, I'm going to go online and I'm going to do a social media check on Johnny that I'm going to bring in, and you're going through, you're looking at LinkedIn, and then you go to Facebook, and if you're anything like me, the next thing you know, you're shopping, you see a deal over here, there's this really cool day, and there's a trick down. I thought it was just me. It's a rabbit hole, right? It's just a place that you do not want to go in the social media checks. But more importantly, once you see something, you can't unsee it. And that's when it becomes a problem, if you're doing these social media checks and going down many rabbit holes and spending lots of money. But really what's important, that you can't unsee it once you've seen it. And there's a lot of stuff out there, and it's important to know how a person is going to conduct themselves. There's a lot about language and tone, and if someone's really negative on their social media, uh, you know, do you need that person in your office to bring that negative energy in? You can, there's a lot you can find out, and it's important to know that stuff. But again, you need to be objective. You don't want to have any preconceived ideas, and that's why it's always good. And the social media rabbit hole of spending and buying things that should be a job a company we do believe should always outsource is the social media checks. Did you got software to do it, right?
Interesting. I'm curious though, like
Sure.
it feels. Look, I'm sure you were 18 once. I was 18 once, Marty, and like I'm not particularly proud of some of the things I did at 18, especially at university. I look back and go, wow, I'm kind of grateful that I kind of wasn't necessarily broadcasting perhaps the way it was today, because I feel like, so I'm curious, how do you feel about that? Because that, unfortunately, a lot of the, especially younger candidates, they've just kind of come through with that. And if you're hiring in the mid-20s and they just happen to have TikTok for the last 5 years, unlucky in many ways, right? And so how do you, as a leading a company which is really in this and kind of evaluating information, and really it's kind of asking for all, you're trying to provide an interpretation on behalf of your customers. How do you think about that kind of, I don't know, what's it, the right to make mistakes or the right to grow up, something like that?
We're not really looking for that kind of thing. That's just normal sort of behavior at a certain age in your life. But I think what's more importantly is the way that they talk about, it's not the party stuff like that. That's just gets overlooked completely. It's the way they talk, their tone, the way that do they show respect for other people. It's more those important human things that we're looking for, not the crazy party weekends, because that doesn't really matter at all, right? That's just like, that doesn't even get reported, to be honest, because why would that? That doesn't impact anybody's performance or, any view. It's the more serious stuff, that we're looking at, what they're talking about. And
So I can relax,
yeah.
what you say.
Yeah, you can relax. Those party kitchens chill.
Okay. Interesting. So
And it's the tone too, Michael. It's the tone.
Yeah.
So like, how do they talk about their work? Right? Oh, I hate this job. I can't stand this. Like,
Yeah.
it's an attitude. Yeah, you can have fun and be crazy and but still have a great attitude and really care about what you're doing versus someone who you don't want them there in your company because it costs a lot of money to hire someone, and then you've got to let them go. So you really got to do your due diligence. And I think that, our social media checks, and because we have the software that does them really quickly and blah, 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 it's just a good thing to know how that person's could present themselves.
Yeah, super interesting, right? Because I imagine a lot of people, when they think about posting on social media, they're mainly talking to their friends, or might think it's kind of like a closed environment, perhaps, and not necessarily one about where it's going to be later evaluated, assessed, perhaps. And I feel like that's a very kind of tricky area. Have you seen? You mentioned just before we jumped on around 9/11 was a real big change in the sector more broadly. What did that cause? What was the catalyst in terms of this whole sector? And just maybe just before you answer that, or maybe as you answer it, help us understand, well, how big is this screening industry thing? Like, forgive me, and I've never really thought about much of it. Like, how big is it? How many of these screens are taking place? Is it? Yeah, sounds like it'd be a multi-billion-dollar industry at this stage.
It is. So the 9/11 thing, that changed the way we saw people. That changed, trust. As I mentioned, it all became about trust. And the industry has really, really grown over the decades because we've been in it for, the longest, and it's really evolved, and but it's evolved in a good way. And I'm on the board for the Professional Background Screening Association. It's in the US. I'm on that board, and I've never seen a group of, we're all at the end of the day competitors in a way. We're all in the background screening industry, but how we all work together as a as a group, a united front I just had a big call today with the Canadian board, to work together to make sure that we're creating safe work environments for companies when they're hiring. It's I've never seen an industry where everybody does look out for each other and how we can best serve our clients collectively. Even though we're all competitors, how we can collectively serve our clients and offer new services and work together to make sure that our clients really do know who they're hiring. It's a very impressive industry, actually. I've been off the board many times and chaired the Canadian board, and it's just a really nice thing to see us all working towards that common goal together.
Interesting. I used to work in the school space, and the amount of collaboration was kind of like alarming, actually.
In the school space?
In the school space, yeah, at least here in Australia. And I was just like, they catch up on a regular basis. They go to, they collaborate a lot, and they actually, and more, which made me nervous, actually, because I was representing a company which was selling into the school space, and the amount of kind of like, what's the word? So much collaboration on that side. You have to be making sure you're very transparent with pricing. You can't pitch it in at one price here and pitch it. And so I feel like that, and which is very powerful, actually. And I would imagine when you're kind of doing trust, you don't want one candidate to, well, actually, just on that bit, if you find a candidate, let's say you find Sarah and she's kind of, being a bit naughty about what misrepresenting her education, is that shared more broadly across you start to build these databases about people at a screening level?
No. That would be because of our privacy laws, especially in Canada, we would not share that information with anybody. We can't, except for the client who ordered it. And remember, the candidate has to give consent to have this done too.
Yeah,
so there is a privacy thing there. And then that's what we always say to the candidate. Well, this might be a good time when you sign that release form to have the background check done, that you might just want to bring up anything that we're going to find out anyway.
Yeah.
Because then it's not such a big deal, right?
Does it happen much?
Not well, it happens enough. We do see a lot of stuff that comes up. Obviously, it comes back every week with misrepresentation, and this is what it mostly is, Michael. It's mostly in the employment verifications, the dates of employment. They'll stretch their job titles, stuff like that, right? We see it mostly in that, and education verifications. It's kind of scary that we see as much misrepresentation in the education verification as well. But those are the two areas that are kind of really critical to check, because if you want to know who you're hiring, that's where you've got to start with the employment and the education. And obviously today, after 9/11, I mean, most companies would just automatically do a criminal record check.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Interesting. I'm curious, from a personal level, just your journey as civil engineer through to CEO to board member and kind of navigating, and mum, which is probably arguably the most important job out of all of them.
Yeah, it is.
How have you found that journey? Because that can be, I know, we see my wife is a particularly high performing female, and that can be a real juggle, that kind of business, family, mum kind of role. And we now see some of her friends who are going into trying for children, and that's such an evolution, and for you to take over such a big job and then also start as a CEO as well, like that kind of, you're CEO of your family or CEO of your bubba to CEO of a company. Like, how did you find that whole process?
You can't do it alone. You have strong supporting cast. You know what? When you've got a lot of people on your team, whether it's your work team, your personal team, your family team, we all juggle a lot. Everybody juggles a lot. That's just the way it is today. But you've got to rely on your people. Without your people, you can't do anything, Michael. And it's really important to have those people to help you juggle all of those things at the same time, because you really can't do it alone. And it's a journey that you don't want to do alone either. I mean, it's just fun to have people supporting you and helping you, and likewise you supporting them. I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoy the PBSA board, the Professional Background Screening Association. Even though we're all sitting together and we're competitors, we're all working towards a common goal. And that's, making sure best practices and things are done right. And we support each other. It's nice. Like I said, we just can't do these things alone. You got to have that network of people who will help or ask for help. I am the queen of asking for help.
Are you really? Wow.
Oh, yes, I will ask for help. We need to have those people that will help us. And when people reach out to you, you have to help them.
I'm so curious on that because I would say most people I talk to find it difficult to ask for help. So just on that
Yeah.
piece, like, what's your secret to being? Why would you say you're the queen of that?
Because I'm the queen of outsourcing everything. It's like, oh yeah, we need to do this, but you know what? I'm going to find someone who can do that for us. I believe in outsourcing and bringing in the experts where you need the experts to help you. Like we work with the police services because they're the experts and I need them to help me, right? Partnerships, Michael, you got to have people on your team you can partner with, because we all want to do great things, but we can't do it alone. We need to have a strong supporting cast behind us.
What would you say to someone who feels like they're being a burden when they ask for help? Because that's something I actually had just yesterday in terms of the people I talk to on a more regular basis, is like encouraging them to kind of embrace their queen of outsourcing piece. Yeah. How do you reframe that burden part where, are you asking for help, especially maybe in a family context where it's not necessarily, there's no commercial arrangement? How do you think about that or frame that or help, advise someone in that space?
That's a good question. I guess, just being genuine and putting up your hand when you need it. People will support you if you ask, but if you don't ask, you won't. And also just being aware when somebody else might need that help, but you might sense that they're not forthcoming with asking for that help. And I think that's really important too.
Interesting. So like an emotional, you're talking about like an empathy almost. So looking at people.
Yeah. Oh, another thing I do that's really important is I'm also a member of Women Presidents Organization, and it's a peer-to-peer advisory group of women at CEO levels, and that's a big help too. That helps me run my business because their logo is kind of like is when you own, you're not alone. And it's true. We have to run these companies and learn these things and have these processes, and you need that support. So I've been a member of WPO for just over 10 years now, and that's a huge supporting network as well. We can't do it alone.
You can't, but a lot of people do, right? And I'm curious in that is it WPO? Is that what it's called? WPO?
Yeah, Women Presidents Organization.
Organization. In terms of that piece, like when you come across a woman who is doing it on their own or trying to do it all on their own, like how do you get them to go, you know what, maybe you could it's differently. I'm just curious on that. But is that something you see a lot, or what's the kind of something that
just in general, like I think people just have to sometimes let go of controlling things, and sometimes it can become a control thing. Well, I have to do that. I have to do this. It's like, no, you have to get help to do that because we all have so much to do. Now with young children, you'll find that out more. Need to ask for help.
All the time.
But it's more important. I think it's more important in business because, we all have so many grand ideas and things we want to do. And in order to do them, you need to have that cast, as I've said before. That's really what will make us successful and make us do great things. And having a company hit 50 years in business, that's a great thing. And there's no way I would have ever been able to touch on and do that if it hadn't have been for that supporting cast. Because some days it's just not easy to do that. But when you've got a cast that you can lean on and then to be there for them, it's just it's critical. 50 years really. The odds of that, the percentage is very, very low. And I think one of the main reasons why is for that reason that it's okay to I'm the queen of outsourcing and asking for help.
Love that. I think I heard a stat last night that the average tenure of a company these days is 15 years. So I think anyone who's done 3x that is, I'm just on that piece, and I think a lot of business owners and kind of entrepreneurs listen to this show. On that piece, what do you think outside of outsourcing is some of the secrets to actually this longevity? And I'm curious on what your take on that.
Oh, yes. finding a solution. Apparently, I have an issue saying no. So when a client comes to me and says, "Hey, Marty, we need you to do this," I'll say, within reason. It's like, yeah, you know what? I think we can do that. It was just like after 9/11. That was the classic example. After 9/11, a company came to me and said, "Geez, I think we need to do criminal record checks." It's like, yeah, you know what? I think that's a great idea. We need to do criminal record checks. Now, it did take me about 2 years to figure that out, but I got the help that we needed. And that's a global thing, right? It was a problem. We all needed help. 9/11 was a tough time for those of us who were on, here at that time. That was the big one where I reached out and asked for help after 9/11 because I found something that we needed to solve, a problem that we need to solve. We lost trust, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, so asking for help. What are the other hot tips for taking your company to 50 years? What do you think?
Working hard, being committed. You know what? You got to have that supporting cast. You really have to have a strong supporting cast to get a company to be 50 years. You have to listen to your clients. You have to be innovative, always coming up with new ideas, listening to, sometimes listening to what's not being said with the clients. And it's all about your clients, right? Like, I look at our client database and it's like, we've had a lot of really long-term clients and just listening to them, responding to them, being innovative, if they have a problem, trying to solve that problem for them.
To round out this conversation, I feel like a lot of people might be like, yeah, I'd love to do screening, but like maybe it's not accessible to them. For someone in that situation, what would be some of your kind of best advice as to something they could try perhaps themselves if they weren't able to utilize your services? What is there anything they can do early on in the process, or is there any kind of, perhaps is it, I don't know, what do you think in terms of that space? What are the kind of key things that they should be focused on if they're trying to?
Want to try to work alone? Yeah, if they want to try to make sure that the person who they're hiring is who they say they are. Some things that they could start to do on their own. They might want to, try to figure out how we can verify their education. Well, there are repositories. You can go online and figure that out. You may have to pay a membership fee. Employment verifications. They got to be contacting their former employers and asking good questions like, what was their title? Dates for their employment, reasons for leaving. That's really important. That's, again, Michael, where we see a lot of misrepresentation. Well, someone could do that on their own. If with consent, if they ask the candidate or whatever, they can, a lot of companies now, they want to see the release form from us before they'll release the employment verification. They want to see that, but that's someplace where they could probably try to start on their own. They could call up the institution and try to get verification of credentials.
Mm-hmm.
They could.
And in terms of what can't they do? I'm just curious from what are the advantages of working with an outsourcing firm, especially given you're big on finding the right person for the job. What can't they typically figure out or do at an individual basis?
Probably criminal record checks and credit checks are probably the most common because you have to have a relationship with the police department. And for credit, if you're hiring anybody in finance, you want to make sure they got a good credit record. And again, unless you have abilities to get into the credit bureaus and, again, always asking for consent, they would have to give their own consent because you can't run these checks that we run without consent. So they'd have to contact a local police station. They could always try, but most police stations just outsource it to corporations.
Interesting.
Or they could go into the local police station. You know what? They could go into the local police station and ask to get their criminal record check done.
Yeah, okay. One of the quotes which really stood out to me about on your website and doing some research into you was that your claim, or you stated that it cost, I think 3 times, maybe 2 times, the annual salary of someone to replace someone. And I told you I was going to ask you this question. So I'm just curious, that seems high. I'm kind of skeptical about that. And I feel like, if I'm a skeptic, I might see that as self-serving, right? It's kind of justifying your value. So just help us understand, how did you kind of get there? What's that about? Because that seems significant.
Yeah. So you can Google that. There's different percentages. I think the common one that we see is 213% of job candidates lie, and it costs you a certain percentage. Different companies do different searches, but and you can just go online and Google and find a lot of them. That's the one that we use the most. And what it is it's, again, like I said, it's obviously a misrepresentation. These numbers, we state where that number comes from on our website, but it's usually a misrepresentation. And like I said, we'd see Bachelor of Arts, University of Toronto, but because the word degree wasn't there, that was a lie. So, there's lots of different places you can go and just Google what percentage. It depends which institution's doing the study, but there's lots of them.
But how do you think, like, so you're saying 213% of someone's salary is what it costs to replace them. So you factoring in because there's a training component in there, or there's
Yes,
kind of like the rigmarole of trying to find someone. What's that?
It's a whole recruiting process. So the time that, that you got to do a job ad, you got to put it out there, you got to sift through resumes and all kinds of stuff. You got to interview. That's really, really time consuming. Like, you think of the cost of all those people in HR who are working typically in HR, going through, that's what they do on a full-time basis, is trying to find the body, it's a very time consuming process to do that. And there's no easy way around that one. That's why it's such an expensive thing to hire someone. When you look at all those back end costs of HR, their recruiting, advertising, wherever they put their ads. I mean, you got to pay for this.
It's a rigmarole as well. Having been through the process of hiring multiple people, it just, especially when you get a candidate, they're so close and everyone's basically on the same page, and then the candidate tells you, "Oh, yeah, I've got something else," and you're like, "Oh."
Oh, that's heartbreaking when you've invested the time and you got the candidate that you want. And what's really important too is that we tell us that you got to listen to your gut. They got to listen to their gut too, right? I mean, yes, you're going to do all the work, you're going to do all the checks, you're going to take the time, and you're going to hire slowly. Hire slowly. They're going to fire quickly, but you got to take the time and do it right. It's not something you could do quickly.
Marty, some wise words there, and thank you for your wisdom and your insight into this whole space. I think good advice there, especially about slowing down around hiring, because I think it can be very, it can be this kind of frantic. I've got to do it, I've got to move quick, got to get this thing offer out. And I think that's what you're saying is it can be, trust but verify, and ultimately don't be afraid to ask for help. And that's exactly where yourself and your crew kind of fit in. So first of all, I just want to say thank you for taking the time out to chat with us. Screening for the One is your new book, both a celebration of 50 years in business, but also advice into how to get it right, how to make sure you find the right candidate, and you can certainly check and make sure you're getting who you think you're getting. So Marty, on behalf of everyone in the audience and for here on the show, thank you so much for taking the time out to chat to us.
Michael, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.